Capex KS60 is a lightweight 216mm slide compound miter saw. In this guide we'll take a look at the different features, setup and system accessories. When setting the machine up, press down on the saw head and shift the lock tab inwards to release headlock. To unlock the column guide, release the locking screw by turning it anti-clockwise. The power switch turns the saw on but doesn't allow the motor head to be plunged downward. To cut with a saw, squeeze the power switch and plunge release together, then the saw head can be plunged downward. To plunge the saw head without starting the saw, press only the plunge release. The Capex 60 saw is capable of angles of 60 degrees to the left and 60 degrees to the right. Positive stops are located at 0, 15, 22.5, 30, 45 and 60 degrees. The miter gauge pointer also includes half degree markings for accurately setting the miter angle to half degree values. To adjust the angle, turn the adjustment knob anti-clockwise. Pull up on the miter stop release lever and rotate the miter to the desired angle. To stop at one of the preset positive lock positions, release the miter stop lever just before reaching the angle and the miter stop will click as it locks into position. There is an adjustable stop underneath the miter angle settings lever to support the saw when placing pressure down on the handle. For ease of use and more accurate working when setting angles close to indexing points, the saw's index lock feature can be disabled. To disable the index feature, pull up on the lever and push it to the left. The KS60 is capable of beveling up to 47 degrees to the left and right hand side. The bevel range selector has positive stops at 0 degrees and 45 degrees. To adjust the angle, release the bevel lock at the back of the saw by turning it clockwise. Once unlocked, the bevel will move to the left hand side and stop at 45 degrees. It has a degree reference scale on both left and right hand sides of the saw. Once the bevel angle has been reached, lock the bevel lock by turning it anti-clockwise. To move the bevel angle beyond 45 degrees, push in the override stop button. The saw can now be moved to 47 degrees. Moving the saw back will move past 45 degrees and find the positive stop at 0 degrees. To bevel the saw to the right, push in the override stop button and repeat the previous steps. The depth limit is used for making partial cuts that do not cut all the way through the workpiece, such as making rebates or trenches for door jambs. When the depth limit lever is engaged, the saw blade's vertical travel is limited from going below the preset height. To engage a depth limit, pull the lever forward. The height is easily adjustable by turning the depth limit lever. Turning the knob clockwise raises the saw blade, and turning it anti-clockwise lowers the saw blade. To disengage the depth limit, push the lever back. The item to be trenched will require a packing piece behind it to ensure the cut is consistent to the end of the workpiece. The KS60 has an LED light that highlights each side of the blade, which assists in lining up the cut. To turn on the LED, press the on-off button to the side of the saw's housing. Pressing the button a second time will turn the LED off. If required, the LED cover can be removed and cleaned by pulling out and removing the cover. The KS60 saw has electronic speed control with soft start electronics. The speed control is variable from 1300 RPM to 3500 RPM. The optimal speed of the saw is predominantly determined by the type of material being cut. There is a guide on the side of the saw's housing that gives some speed recommendations for various materials. The KS60 saw can be connected to a dust extractor to reduce dust during operation. The dust port swivels to either side and accepts either a 27 or 36mm Festool hose. If requiring to clamp materials being cut, the FS clamps fit in a groove either at the rear or front of the saw table on both left and right hand sides of the saw. The FS and FastFix clamps will enable clamping of material in the grooves. The auxiliary fence provides support for workpieces. The two halves of the fence can be slid toward or away from the blade or removed completely. Performing bevel cuts requires the auxiliary fence to be moved depending on the bevel angle being used. To move the auxiliary fence, unlock the back lock nut, slide the fence into position, then retighten the back lock nut. The extension arms can be extended for extra material support. To extend the arms, unlock holding bolts and pull out the extension arm. The Smart Bevel bisects a given angle and converts the angle measurement into a miter setting. The bevel has arrows that indicate the edge required to be aligned with the bisection marks on the saw table. That then provides the exact miter angle for the measured corner. To measure an internal corner, loosen the lock wheel on the bevel. Place the bevel into the corner. Retighten the lock wheel. For measuring external corner, extend the extensions forward. Place the bevel in the corner. When the arms are lined up with the corner walls, retighten the wheel lock. Place the bevel on the saw with one of the arms up against the fence. Unlock the miter angle and align edge of bevel with bisection marks on saw table. Adjust the table angle of the saw until both marks line up with the edge of the bevel. Lock the miter setting on the saw. Festool offers saw blades for cutting different materials. There are saw blades available for cutting timber, plastics, laminate and aluminium. When changing blades, disconnect power to the saw. The hex key is stored in the back of the saw inside the power cord storage. To make access easier, pull the saw forward on the column guides and lock the saw in the forward position. To change the blade, place hex key in the locking nut, push in the spindle lock and rotate the blade to engage the spindle lock. This prevents the arbor from turning. Unscrew the arbor bolt by turning it clockwise. The arbor bolt is a left-hand thread and turns the opposite of a standard screw. To loosen the blade is always in the direction of rotation of the saw blade. Raise the blade guard out of the way and remove the outboard arbor flange and saw blade from the arbor. There is a friction lining on the arbor flanges that grips the blade, but also permits the blade to slip slightly in the event of a binding condition. Inspect the friction lining on the two arbor flanges. When installing a new blade, make sure the blade is orientated correctly and install the blade onto the inboard arbor flange. Replace the outboard arbor flange, tighten the arbor bolt. Pull the power trigger and lower the motor head down. Push the motor head all the way to the rear of the saw and tighten the column guide lock. Set the miter angle to 60 degrees and push down on the miter lock lever. Coil the power cord on the reel at the rear of the saw. When the saw is collapsed for transport, it is very well balanced and easily carried using the integrated carrying handles. To keep yourself updated on Festool product information and applications, subscribe to our channel below.